We would get to, you see, you were working with very small numbers, so you would talk to people as they came in, you know, and chat to them and whether they wanted to sing or not. And you would generally jot down their name if you didn't know them. But generally there wasn't a name call, or there wasn't a certain running order, or there was, I mean, I would sort of do the Farity most nights. And Donal, there was just Donal and myself when we started off, Donal de Burra. And Donal would tend to write down the name of the singer as they came in, or maybe as they sang. And at the very end of the night, then, he would call out all the names of the people who sang. Okay. So it was kind of a nice recognition, particularly people who weren't maybe used to singing, a nice recognition of that they had made a contribution. They might sing one or two songs, you know, depending on how big their repertoire was and how big the attendance was. But that was generally the layout of the night, where you'd talk to people when they come in. You'd ask if they wanted to sing or not, or recite, or say a poem. And then you'd come to them at some stage, but it was on a nod basis, you know, rather than introducing somebody. Yeah. We would have introduced guests at some stage in Thomas House, and we would have continued that practice in the Four Seasons. And I, among other factors, you know, I think it certainly helped too. I think when somebody heard that there was a certain guest coming, that you would get it, maybe you would have your core group and then a certain number of people coming to hear this person alone, you know. And it introduced singers to the club as well, you know, it worked both ways, which was very important. It spread the word of the club outside of Dublin, because if singers come, they're going to talk to others about it, you know. So it became known. Slow process again, I think, but over time I think people heard about it through the word of mouth of other singers, you know. I think when you move to a new venue, you either gather up new people or you kind of fail to, you know, the move. And I think certainly for those three, because they're the ones I would have strong memories of, I would certainly have visited the other venues, but really as a listener rather than as somebody who was involved in it anymore, you know. And it's a very short period of time, you know, 79 to 83. It seemed like an eternity, you know, in a very good way, but it seemed like forever, you know. By the time I moved in 83, I felt that I had been involved in Góilín for such a long time, but it was very short. And I suppose when you're establishing something, you feel the time, because you look at the details much more, you know, because you have to, you know, and so we were doing that. So it was hard, you know, at times it was kind of hard enough work, albeit very pleasant work. But you know, there was a huge involvement, and you need to get around to other clubs, you need to talk to people, and you need to get feedback, you know. But it was a lovely, lovely time. I mean, there was a huge excitement about it. You know, there was that whole idea of something starting anew and working, you know, and hearing new voices, you know. There was a massive freshness and excitement about that you could never repeat, I think, you know. So there was all that. But as you say, I think the move, now we didn't move by choice, really. Very often the venue maybe ran out, or there was a change, or some change or other. So the moves are very, very rarely by choice, you know. They do give a fresh impetus to it, as well. Certainly the move from Thomas House to the Four Seasons gave it a fresh impetus, which probably needed, you know, and probably helped certainly in the early days. And I mean, I know it's established now in the Teachers Club for a long time, which is good. I think that it has a home, because I think you do need that as well. But I think in the early days that little bit of moving around was no harm, you know. Once you had singers, as I said, willing to come, and there was a huge generosity as well. In the early days, you know, the established singers like Frank Hart were enormously helpful. Liam Weldon, you know, Diarmid, as I mentioned, Paddy Tunney, who wasn't living in Dublin, but anytime he was in Dublin would have dropped in, you know. So I remember those, and sometimes they wouldn't have been guesting, sometimes they would, but I remember those people as being extremely generous. Now, they loved coming, and they liked the appreciation, but we also kind of, you know, we were working on a two-way stream, as it were. They were enormously helpful to the club. I think established singers did give it an impetus that you couldn't do without them, really. You know, it needed the help of those singers. And we got that quite early on, once people knew what it was about, you know.